not to be confused with the tombs of the Sanhedrin. Sanhedria Cemetery is a 27-dunam Jewish burial ground in the Sanhedria neighborhood of Jerusalem, adjacent to the intersection of Levi Eshkol Boulevard, Shmuel Hanavi Street, and Bar Ilan Street. Unlike the Mount of Olives and Har Hamanuchot cemeteries that are located on the outer edges of the city, Sanhedria Cemetery is situated in the heart of Western Jerusalem, in close proximity to residential housing. It is operated under the jurisdiction of the Kehilat Yerushalayim Shevra Kadisha and accepts Jews from all religious communities. As of the 2000s, the cemetery is nearly filled to capacity. History. Until 1948, Jewish burials in Jerusalem were conducted in the centuries-old Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives. In January 1948, the Arab siege at Jerusalem made the Mount of Olives inaccessible, as the route to the cemetery passed through hostile Arab villages. The catalyst for the opening of Sanhedria Cemetery was the March 23, 1948 explosion of 3 British Army trucks filled with kerosene on Ben Yehuda Street in downtown Jerusalem. The explosion collapsed the Atlantic Hotel and heavily damaged adjacent buildings. 42 Jewish men, women, and children were killed in the blast, but there was nowhere to bury them, while the bodies lay in the courtyard of the Baikur Holom Hospital for 5 days. Representatives of the Kehilat Yerushalayim Shevra Kadisha scoured the city for a suitable location for a new cemetery. An empty lot next to the Sanhedria neighborhood, in the vicinity of a government agricultural experiment station, was deemed appropriate, and permission was obtained from British Mandate authorities. The site was hastily consecrated by Ashkenazi Chief Rabbi Yitzhak Halevi Herzog and Sephardi Chief Rabbi Ben Zion Hayuziel, and the bodies were buried on the 5th day in the presence of thousands. In April 1948, 47 victims of the Hadassah Medical Convoy massacre, burned beyond recognition, were buried in a mass grave in the Sanhedria Cemetery. In the 1970s, the son of one of the victims discovered that only 25 victims had actually been buried here and 22 had been declared missing. With the outbreak of war in May 1948, Sanhedria Cemetery was located close to the front line on the northern border. For a while it was completely exposed to enemy fire. Burials resumed after the first ceasefire on June 11, 1948, but 4 weeks later, the pallbearers at a funeral were targeted by Arab sniper fire and 1 died, causing a cessation of burials once again. 2 small burial grounds in central Jerusalem, Sheikh Badr Cemetery in the Sheikh Badr neighborhood, and Shara Zedek Cemetery behind the first Shara Zedek Hospital, were then open unused until the end of the war. Following the 1949 Armistice Agreement, with the Mount of Olives remaining under Jordanian control, Sanhedria Cemetery became a regular burial ground. With the opening of the new neighborhoods of Shmuel Hanavi, Marlot Daphne, and Ramat Eshkol, the cemetery was encircled by residential housing. After the establishment of the State of Israel, it emerged that the cemetery was not registered with the Government Land Ownership Office and was in violation of certain building codes. While Israeli law mandates a minimum distance of 100 meters between graves and apartment houses, in some sections of Sanhedria Cemetery the distance is only 20 meters. As a result of procedural violations, the cemetery was tied up in litigation for many years. Operation. Sanhedria Cemetery is operated under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Kehilat Yerushalayim Shevra Kadisha. This burial society was founded in 1939 by Zionist leaders and moderate rabbis of the Old Yishuv, leading many Haredi residents of the Old Yishuv to shun the Sanhedria Cemetery. Graves are topped by a horizontal, rectangular limestone gravestone engraved with the name, date, and accolades of the deceased. The gravestones of Eleazar Sukenik, a noted Israeli archaeologist who researched the nearby tombs of the Sanhedrin, and his wife Shassia, are uniquely decorated with carvings and motifs of the Second Temple era. The cost of burial at Sanhedria Cemetery is not subsidized by the state, as in other cemeteries. In September 2008, the price of a double plot stood at 75,000 shekels. At the southern end of the cemetery stands the Sanhedria Funeral Parlor, which also conducts funeral services for burials in other cemeteries. In 1992, former Prime Minister Menahem Begin issued a state funeral in favor of eulogies at the Sanhedria Funeral Parlor and burial at the Mount of Olives. The side of the funeral parlor overlooking the busy commercial intersection of Shmuel Hanavi and Bar Ilan streets displays large metal letters that read. A sign posted on the outer wall of the cemetery, facing Levi Eshkol Boulevard, warns Kohanim not to pass under the trees overhanging the wall in order to avoid tumult. Notable people buried at Sanhedria Cemetery: Rabbis Ben Zion Abba Shaul, Rosh Yeshiva of Porat Yosef Yeshiva, Jerusalem; Shmuel Berenbaum, Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva, Brooklyn, NY; Yaakov Moshe Harlap, Rav of Sharei Hesed and Rosh Yeshiva of Merkat Harav Kook; Yitzhak Halevi Herzog, Ashkenazi Chief Rabbi of Israel; Yisrael Elazar Hopstein, Konitzer Rebbe; Avraham Kalmanovitz, Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva, Brooklyn, NY; Shraga Moshe Kalmanovitz, Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva, Brooklyn, NY; I-11, Jerusalem Zadik and Rav of the Prisoners; Shimshon Aharon Polanski, Rav of Teplik, Ukraine; Avraham Elimelech Shapira, Grodz Hiska Rebbe; David Feuerwerker, Chief Rabbi of Lyon, Rabbi in Neuilly-sur-Seine in Paris, Dayan in the Vadher of Montreal, Canada; Nissan Aharon Tikochinsky, Director, ETZ Haim Yeshiva; Yechiel Mitchell Tikochinsky, Talmudist and educator; David Tversky, Rachmes Dryuka Rebbe of Jerusalem; Yehuda Zadka, Rosh Yeshiva of Porat Yosef Yeshiva, Jerusalem; David Alexander Winter, Rabbi in Lubeck; Shaul Yisraeli, Rosh Yeshiva of Merkat Harav Kook; Ovadia Yosef, former Sephardi Chief Rabbi of Israel; Israeli academics and government figures Yehuda Amichai, noted Israeli poet; Umberto Cassuto, Italian Jewish biblical scholar; Gad Frumkin, Israel High Court judge; Simcha Holtzberg, Israeli activist; David Horowitz, first governor of the Bank of Israel; Esther Raziel Naor, Israeli politician; Cecil Roth, British Jewish historian; Gershom Scholem, German-born Israeli philosopher and historian; Reuven Shiloh, director of the Mossad; Eleazar Sukenik, Israeli archaeologist; Shmuel Timir, Israeli Minister of Justice.